Tite Kubo established himself on the Mount Rushmore of Shonen mangaka when he began the Soul Society arc of his weekly supernatural manga, Bleach. One of the greatest rescue arcs ever told, Soul Society takes Ichigo Kurosaki, a badass teenager who recently inherited supernatural powers, on a mission alongside his high school friends from Earth to Rukangai, a militaristic spiritual world. They intend to save Rukia Kuchiki, the one responsible for giving Ichigo his powers and saving his life from a hollow. Because of her actions, Rukia is sentenced to death in Seireitei capital. Ichigo and his crew, now with newly awakened powers, infiltrate Soul Society and assemble a ragtag group of misfits to help them rescue Rukia and return her back to the human world. But as our heroes encounter increasingly powerful threats, a conspiracy starts to creep to the surface, and Ichigo finds himself trapped in something far bigger than what he, or the reader, had initially imagined. When Soul Society debuted, Weekly Shonen Jump was experiencing yet another golden era. One Piece, Naruto, Gintama, Eyeshield 21, and Bleach were leading the charge for the Shonen Revolution. Rescues were all the rage, and the big three were either concluding or beginning their own arcs that featured a prominent raven-haired, ivory-skinned character handing themselves over to the antagonistic organization. Kubo's approach was grand in scale. He went from Karakura Town to a brand new world where the power levels scaled to heights that most shonens at the time didn't feature. Bleach was an iconic series for its use of violence without being edgy, and gore without acting juvenile. Women in Bleach were very sexy. Fan service was present prior to Soul Society, but now Kubo was introducing characters that were much more than eye candy. Even the male characters were designed to be really fucking cool. Captains wore sharp beards, had fashionable haircuts, cared about their style, and carried themselves with the utmost respect. Kubo was showing off an awareness for manga fashion and design that hadn't been seen since Araki. Even landscapes were well developed. Despite how monochrome Soul Society was, Kubo would stretch out on color pages and showcase how vibrant this new world could be. This arc was more than just increasing the stakes for a typical battle shonen. It was a brash announcement that this young mangaka was coming for the throne, and his new style of writing would shift the manga landscape for decades to come. Ichigo and crew find themselves at the gate leading towards Soul Society. While it seems that they'll be able to enter with ease, they're quickly met by one of the most menacing, well-designed characters in shonen manga, Ichimaru Gin. Ichimaru effortlessly slashes off the gatekeeper's arm and pushes out our heroes, all with a cheeky smile and gloomy atmosphere. Bye-bye! Prior to this arc, Ichigo, Chad, Orihime, and Ishida had faced mostly hollows. When Ichigo went up against Renji and Byakuya the first time around, he was literally and figuratively torn to shreds. The introduction of human-like enemies with transforming weapons was a direction that Bleach was obviously headed towards, but no indication to the sheer strength of characters was given up until this point. Ichimaru so casually preventing our heroes from advancing towards Rukia was a shocking twist, but one that excites the reader, offering anticipation for a supporting villain and the engagements that would follow. Also obvious at this point of the manga is Kubo's efforts to heavily invest in characterization and design. In the prior arc, aesthetic ruled supreme. His bleak, occult-inspired art coded the first 70 chapters, but by Soul Society, all that gives away to a cleaner, militaristic approach. The supporting cast are uniquely drawn, with individuality amongst every member of the Gotei 13. From their first appearance, the audience can tell that even if these are antagonistic characters, they'll be intriguing to read. But 13 captains? With additional vice captains and squad members? Not to mention other supporting characters. Isn't this a bit too much to introduce all at once? Of course not. Kubo is hands down the master of ensemble writing in shonen manga. While large casts are quite popular now, at the time of Soul Society, you never saw such a vast cast of characters in a mainstream story. For context, A Storm of Swords, the third installment of the Game of Thrones series, had come out just a few years earlier and had lit the literary world ablaze with George R.R. Martin's refinement of the ensemble casting for 21st century fiction. Over in comics, Grant Morrison had leveled up DC's heroes to their current godlike status on JLA during the late 90s. But it was Mark Millar's turns on the Ultimates and the Authority that caught the pop culture zeitgeist of the early 2000s in comics. Millar distinguished, humanized, and grounded literal gods and set the tone in his medium for balanced ensemble writing. These seminal pieces of fiction came in the wake of The Real World becoming a global hit. Television audiences had become savvier, more attuned to clever writing, and had developed a wanting for more sophisticated, elaborate storytelling. Kubo, I have no doubt, was very aware of how audiences had matured, and his ambitions in Bleach would embrace these stylistic shifts in culture, melding violence, sex appeal, horror, and dark humor into one of the finest arcs in Weekly Shonen Jump history. As our cast of invaders finally progress through the streets of Seireitei, you see a lot of experimentation with their respective battles. Kubo is allergic to subtlety when it comes to his art. Characters routinely hold poses that push beyond the frames of the panels. Weapons are varied and vicious, taking on sword forms, becoming gas giants, or miniaturizing to beautiful, yet deadly petals. Shikai and Bankai are such fascinating scaling concepts. Dark cloaks and light blouses are pressed against muscular skin. Cloth ripples across the frames of tall, strong Bishonen men, not unlike what was seen during Yu Yu Hakusho. Huge anime zitties and flowing Farrah Fawcett hair adorns women who wouldn't look out of place in a Miss Universe competition. But despite the visual overindulgence, these new characters are quite compelling. Hitsugaya is an incredible character written in the Vanguard trope within Bleach, but could easily be the MC of a battle shonen all on his own. You're immediately drawn to him, his frosty demeanor and icy powers, a shonen ace in a young boy's body, cool hair, and a cold as fuck ice dragon. Truly an icon. All of those sentiments are echoed with Kenpachi, whose frightening demeanor and insatiable bloodlust flows from every single panel. Whether if it's a flashback or a battle with his face being split open, or him casually talking with his kawaii chibi bestie Yachiru, the fact that Kubo was capable of creating such striking, individualistic characters in such a short period of time is a testament to how on point he was during this stage of his career. The writing of Soul Society was also far beyond most of his peers. One Piece was melodramatic to the point of sappiness, but Bleach was Shakespearean, Sorkin-esque. Hinamori's mental breakdown as she loses her greatest object of admiration, her captain Aizen, was written quite well. She descends into irrational outbursts and even gets herself jailed because of her rash actions. While not everyone can appreciate her character, I thought it was a great touch to show how someone who is emotionally quirky go through such intense pain constantly to the point of mind break. Rukia's melancholy as she contemplates her execution is also a brilliant touch. She accepts her death with very little resistance, and she looks back on her life in a way that reveals so much about Ichigo, Aizen, and herself. This is how you do a flashback. Kubo would do a number of flashbacks later in Bleach to flesh out other characters and the world, but here, it's done in such a way that you wish you could spend more time with Rukia, even if she's locked up. Her figure, already small and wispy, becomes more gauntly as the arc goes on, an accurate portrayal of a person who is sitting on death row. All of this torture pays off when Ichigo finally saves Rukia from her execution. Her happiness speaks volumes, and believe me, I cried reading that chapter the first time around, and I'm welling up tears right now, writing notes as I reread this chapter. And yeah, I'm a bit emotional right now too, reading this out during the recording. Kubo peppers interesting devices that would be picked up at later points in the series. The implied nature of relationships between characters is a big one, but also the intricate details surrounding Aizen's death would be explored further, to lesser results. It's so fascinating that Kubo was able to reach such incredible heights so early into his career. One might consider Soul Society to be the manga story he wanted to tell all along, with what came before being a cop-out so he wouldn't get cancelled again, and what comes after being an infinite money glitch, one that's still paying off till this day. Chapter 162 of Bleach was published entirely in color. This is Ichigo's Bankai chapter, and hands down, one of the greatest moments of all time for Weekly Shonen Jump. I wish I could articulate how amazing this was when the chapter first dropped. Forums went crazy, blogs were buzzing, other bankais had been featured throughout Soul Society, so it was only a matter of time before we got to Ichigo's. His transformation was sleek, his outfit Neo-like. The billowing black coat and Tensa Zangetsu's traditional Nodachi shape was a stark contrast to other weapons and abilities featured before. To me, this is one of the greatest shonen transformation sequences, up there with Goku's Super Saiyan 1, Gon's age acceleration, or whatever the fuck it was that Sukuna did to Gojo. Aizen's death being a hoax, his assault on Hinamori, and subsequent heel turn reveal to the rest of the cast is hands down one of the greatest plot twists that I've ever read. It's amazing how Soul Society sprints to such an epic end, one that easily tops how it started. Tite Kubo introduced dozens of characters in an arc and made you care for every single one of them. Their reactions actually mean something. They aren't just showing up in panels to fill page count. Every moment, every line of dialogue contributes to the overall plot. Yorichi's training arc, Tosen's internal conflict and betrayal, Zabimaru's spiritual connection with Renji, Rangiku's mommy milkers, Mayuri's assault on his artificial daughter, Ishida's ultimate move, every single beat fucking hits. If, for whatever godforsaken reason, you haven't read Soul Society yet, please do. It's a Weekly Shonen Jump greatest hit.